Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the 2022 season of Ferg's Footy Fanfare. I'm Ned, and as always, I'm joined by Jay. Jay, how are we, mate?
Good, Serge. It's been a couple of weeks. I have a nice bit of knowledge that is 0% AFL related, but I was on the way home today and listening to SEN. Christian Welch from Melbourne Storm was on. I think he has a somewhat regular role, an irregular role. Melbourne Storm has the highest number of members in the NRL.
Yeah, wow. That's very surprising.
I could not believe they couldn't pin it down to an actual number. Welch believed it was around the 35,000 mark, but I'm assuming that they overpassed Brisbane Broncos at some stage. I can't imagine. I know that you've always said that Newcastle has a big supporter base.
Yeah, Parramatta have a good following. I think there's a fair few on the Panthers bandwagon, and I think South Sydney have quite a following as well. But it doesn't surprise me, to be honest. I thought Melbourne would have been top 3.
Yeah, I
personally.
suppose if you've got one team for the entire state. But that caught my eye. I was quite surprised by that. So early derail, no way to get started.
That's it. So obviously we haven't been chatting. It has been the bye round. So in saying that, there hasn't been much to talk about. Off field, there's been a fair bit to digest, especially just over the last previous week. Suppose we'll get stuck into really what's been the top of the agenda this week, and that's been the Bailey Smith incident and also the AFL drug policy, which is now in review. What's your take on it?
Well, I think it might be best, and if you want to do this, by all means, you've probably got more knowledge on it. But how does the self-reporting aspect of the current AFL drug policy work, particularly in the off-season?
I'm not sure, but I know the precedent that was set from the Shane Mumford incident. When was that? 2018. That it was 2 weeks. So it was always going to be 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks is pretty light, actually. When you put it in comparison with what Jaden Stevenson did.
Yeah, I think the 2 weeks is light as well. I think that AFL players, regardless of what time of the year it is, whether they like it or not, I think there's almost an obligation to be an upstanding citizen and a role model, and particularly someone of Bailey Smith's stature. He hasn't shied away from any press prior to this incident. He's very well known, and as far as I can tell, he's very well liked. I have a slightly different opinion of him. I think he's an outstanding footballer. But one thing that I was pleased with how they handled it and how Bailey Smith got on the front foot of it. I don't excuse any of his actions in the way that it was done, but at least he got out and, was actually really truthful and honest about the tough times that he'd been enduring. So I think the 2 weeks is probably a bit lenient. And I think that, it really does. What do you think about the future of the drug, in terms of dobbing yourself in, or does it need to be stricter from the first strike?
I think I still don't mind the 3 strikes you're out. I think, there could be variables like drink spiking, even though I don't think we really see that. But I think the penalties have to be a bit tougher. So regardless, you get a strike. Like, I'd like to see Bailey have copped maybe 6 weeks and a hefty fine and be forced to do some sort of counselling or, something to try and get him off drugs and the help that he needs.
That's it. And he said that it happened, just after the grand final loss and in those months of the pre-season. But you do have that time to put your hand up and say, look, I partook in activities that, that aren't looked kindly upon. And everyone makes mistakes, but, he's not sorry until it comes out. And I think that's what we see with, any kind of drug incident.
Yeah, just sorry that he's caught, really.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. What do you think, 3 strikes? Is that still fair, or do you think it needs to be harsher?
I'm okay with the 3 strikes. I think that maybe the first strike is, as far as I'm aware, a suspended fine, so it's not all completely paid, and your name you're not outed in the community. So I think that maybe there could be further steps to deter players from partaking in illicit substances up until that point.
I just think they need to make the penalty a bit harsher so it's a bit less inviting. I mean, people will look at it now and go, oh, look, Bailey and Shane have only been given 2 weeks for doing so. Whereas if you've been given, like, for example, like a 6 to 10 week ban, then you're like, that's really going to cost my side, especially if you're a really good footballer.
Yeah, and I suppose there's also a comparison, between the, willingly knowing and having that mental thought to partake, where you have, that whole scandal, the Essendon drug saga, and Ahmed Saad as well, who got extensive bans for performance-enhancing drugs, but nonetheless, from what the public is led to believe, they didn't have the knowledge that they were, taking at the time illicit substances.
And then we had the Willie Rioli case, which is different because he did tamper with a test, but he spent, 2 years out of the system? Maybe even longer.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years.
Yeah. Obviously, we've been through the bye rounds. I'd like to get your opinion on the bye rounds. Do you like them? Does it need to be reviewed?
What was wrong with the split round? And this is a serious question. I've got no idea what was wrong with the split round, and I'm not too sure what benefits arise out of having the buys over a 3-week period.
Yeah, I'd much rather it be either just done in 2 rounds or they just say 1 week off in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think just dragging it out over 3 weeks is a bit too much for mine. And I just don't see how it's really viable.
Well, it's so peculiar as well in the games, in the rounds where you've got 6 matches, that they've started to do Thursday nights now.
Yeah, so that's another thing as well, Thursday nights. What's your thoughts on Thursday nights? Obviously so we're recording now, just 45 minutes for Richmond Carlton on a Thursday night. Last Thursday night it was 22,000. Obviously against the interstate side, but I still think it's very inexcusable from Richmond. But you got to think it's middle of winter, school night.
It's a peculiar dilemma for the AFL in particular, because we've had the first 12, 13 rounds been a discussion of the lowest crowds that we've had in over 2 decades. And, people want more football. They want it stretched over a longer period of time, but there's not a lot of desire and enticement to actually have the AFL create that if people aren't going to get to Thursday night games. And, I love watching Thursday night games from home. I'm glad that St Kilda don't play Thursday nights, because I probably wouldn't go to those games. It takes a lot out. It's a long trip, particularly where you are. I mean, if you had been somewhere in the CBD area, I'm sure you would have gone to those last 2 games. But, you have to take a day out to get to and from the footy and work around that. So it makes it impossible for a lot of people on a Thursday. And you made a really good point about school as well.
So we went to a Thursday night game last year and I got home right on midnight. So, yeah.
You went back down your way, did you?
Yes, we went to St Kilda Richmond.
Yes, I recall the game. I wasn't sure whether you went home that night.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I think it's good in television, and probably realistically now when we're looking at the new broadcast deal and all that television is probably king, especially now with the low crowd numbers we're seeing.
Well, is that something that perhaps they try and do, whether they sacrifice a game with, performing clubs, but don't necessarily draw the large crowds and then have them on Thursday nights rather than, sacrifice, Richmond Carlton tonight playing on a Thursday night, if Friday night and a Saturday night, that's going to pull 70,000. I think, they'd be happy with 50,000 tonight.
I think they're expecting 52,000 tonight. I think that's pretty ambitious. I was talking to Dad in the car and I said, I reckon it'll probably be double what last week was. So I reckon mid-40s, low 40s will probably be where it's at. I think, if they're going to focus on Thursday night football being more for television, you're going to have to start looking at, obviously, lower performing sides or games with a bit less interest, which could also be good for the game, that people actually do then turn on instead of not turning on, say, on a Saturday twilight, Saturday Arvo or Sunday Arvo, especially with pay TV. So if they're able to have that extra game on free to air and being on that Thursday night, it could be more beneficiary.
Yeah, it only seems to be becoming an issue now because crowds are a problem. When there was this whole talk of expansion, you got your Monday nights, even throughout COVID when there was footy every day of the week, 27 games in 27 days, and we're all thinking this could become, the future. We never thought the crowd numbers would drop off as significantly as they have.
Yeah, obviously there's probably external factors to that. Obviously, we're going through a bit of a cost of living crisis. I know I was hearing on the radio coming home that the Fans Association are trying to bring back physical ticketing. I don't know whether that's going to be with membership cards, but it's going to make it easier for you to print out your ticket so you can take your ticket there. I've said from the day dot that I used to like just have my membership card.
Yeah.
Scan it and you're in. No, battery can't go flat on it.
I suppose while we're on the subject of ticketing and all that, a group of people that I'd probably like to tip my hat off to is the North Melbourne fans. I don't say that very often, but, they've received a lot of media criticism in the build-up to the game against GWS on Sunday afternoon, and they ended up pulling a bigger crowd than they had against Melbourne. So I thought that was a magnificent, call to arms between the fans to really come out and support the club. And I feel a bit sorry for them because, their team dished up that. So good on them for, really buckling down and showing their support for the club and getting down in what everyone was more than happy to have a laugh about, to have that lowest crowd number.
Yeah, it's not very indicting to even watch North Melbourne, let alone go out of your way to actually go to the football and watch them. So, yeah, hats off to their fans for sticking fat with them. Hopefully, things improve for them in the future. So now as we're looking into the future, we're now looking at the Premiership/finals race. Obviously, over the last 3 weeks, the Premiership race has really opened up like a can of worms with Melbourne losing 3 on the trot. Collingwood have made made a mark the last few weeks. And I think we've seen a few sides just drop out of finals contention. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, it's just such a different. It's done a complete 180 since we last spoke about it. Melbourne and their pretty significant decline in form, particularly from their transition from midfield into their forward 50. They've lost any kind of flow. Is there a team that is standing out at the moment? There's not. Fremantle played really well against Brisbane, but that was a really good game up until that 10-minute patch in the third quarter. And Brisbane played well last week against St Kilda, but didn't look like they were going to set the world alight. So, you've got Carlton in 4th place. It's great to be a neutral fan or even just a fan of tight contests, because I think that any team that's probably in the top 7, and then you've got teams like Richmond who, when they play well, they're more than capable of winning. So, it's great. All the 8 teams that really can give each other a run for their money.
Yeah, I think, so I've been doing a bit of research during my lunch break today. So I was looking at what it's sort of going to take for a team to make the finals. And this is what I've pretty much done to narrow out who can and who can't. So I think anyone from Port Adelaide up can play finals. So 12th up. Okay. So we've got 8 teams fighting for 4 spots. The reason, GWS are only a win behind, but the thing that I've done with my research, so in the past 10 years, only 2 teams have made the 8 with a percentage less than 100.
Yeah.
And GWS sit on 92%.
Yeah.
And going by just researching from probably about the last 6 years, the mid 40s to high 40s. I think 48 premiership points will be the golden number this year, which it has been over previous years. 2020 was an outlier, and I think 2016 it may have been a bit higher, but that generally seems to be where it's at. So Port play Sydney this weekend. I think if Port lose, which I think is looking likely with the outs that they've got, I don't think you can see them picking up another 28 premiership points.
Yeah, well, I've heard from particular pundits and journalists throughout the season. It's going to take this could be a year where it takes 13 wins plus percentage, just with so many teams fighting for that area. So I think that it'll be at least 12 wins.
I think 12 used to always sort of be that would get you in, and it was just the win more than you lose sort of thing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because if we look at St Kilda, for example, like they're going to have, if they win 4 out of their next 10, that's 12 wins. And I don't think that that's a strong enough, just off face value, without looking into it. I think that I would be able to look at Richmond and say, I think that they're going to be capable of winning 5 of their next 10. So that would put them equal on points, for example, at 48. It's going to be interesting, and even for the top 4, you're going to have, if Carlton win tonight, they're going to be equal first on points, and they'll be a game clear of that second 4. So it's all up for grabs at the moment. No spot is guaranteed. Probably closest thing's last place at the moment, but you've still got 2 teams battling out there.
Yeah, just 2%. Couple of healthy results, and especially the West Coast getting a few troops back. You never know. Yeah, so who are you liking? Give me your top 4.
I don't think the top 4 is going to change in terms of who's in it. The order, I couldn't pick the order. I probably think you can only go based on current form. Go Brisbane. I think Fremantle. I'll go Brisbane, Fremantle, Melbourne, Carlton.
Yeah. The only sides that I can see getting into that top 4 outside of those 4 would probably be Sydney or Geelong, personally.
And that's the thing, Geelong, they just do it time and time again. They started off and they've had some uncharacteristic performances, but I think they've had 3 on the trot now, and they've managed to do it away from home. They've managed to do it at home. They're just proving how resourceful and their experience as well.
Yeah, they're doing it well, but just under the radar.
Yeah, exactly.
In previous years, we've seen Geelong sort of be around that top 3 mark most of the year. So, they're in the hunt for the top 4.
And a very healthy percentage.
Yeah. I'm not sure what their fixture's like, to be completely honest. And I think that's what it might come down to. Who gets those top 4 spots? Who gets those top 8 spots?
I do know, just out of fluke more so, their next 2 games are West Coast away. And then they play Richmond, do they?
Yes.
Well, that'll be a good game. And then they've got North Melbourne.
Yeah. So you minimum 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So go back to my list here. So last week we had the 2 Port players. Was it Jonas
and Butters?
Butters, yep. They went off with a head clash. It was a pretty gnarly head clash. Both of them had a bit of claret coming out of them. I did find it a bit weird that there was no concussion test done on it, just given by the severity. And this is something that the NRL have adopted this year with their HIA assessments, is that it's now done by an independent body. Do you think this is something that the AFL should look into doing, just to sort of have a bit of quality control and just probably keep it a bit more fair?
Look, I really don't think that it will hurt. I watched that live and was very surprised to see that they just got the tape up and then got sent back out. Given the time of the game, it was really close to that stage, within a goal, and heading into the last minutes of the last quarter. You like to think that the doctors have been entrusted, with the care of the players, and they go to whatever lengths are necessary to conclude that there is no concussion. But it's without a word of a lie, that's the quickest turnover that I've ever seen from a head knock to being out on the ground, especially with a head knock with such ferocity as well. So I think that there would be nothing to lose by having an independent body and someone that's constantly reviewing, and then maybe they're on the bench and then they go over and say, you need to bring him off. You need to go through the concussion protocols, which doesn't it take 20 minutes anyway to find out? Like they do their test and give it 20 minutes.
Yes, I think that's what they do.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting the doctor at Port Adelaide
No,
at all.
and neither am I. What I think would have happened is that during the bandage work that they were getting, they would have been asked whatever their concussion questions are, and they would have been able to figure out fairly quickly that they weren't concussed without going through the actual step-by-step protocol, and they would have said, yep, we'll get you back on, don't worry about it.
The ARC also had the ability to tell the umpires that someone is suffering from concussion symptoms, much like the bunker can in the NRL. I'm just thinking maybe if there's an independent body, then those two players come out and then that person for that independent body can sit at the screens, monitor those two players a lot closely than what someone in the ARC or in the bunker, or however you want to say it.
Well, you get an objective assessment.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. You've got no one worrying about the time or the scoreboard. You've got that one person that's solely focused on the well-being of the player.
And then if they can see any symptoms or any, uncharacteristic things, they can go, they can then tell someone downstairs that can notify the respective club that you've got to get him off. He's got to come off for a head assessment. Agreed.
No, get it on board. Do it. Are you going for AFL CEO next year, or?
I wish, but no. I think there's a lot of things that need to be fixed, not just from a CEO point of view, but from a rules point of view. I think there'd be a bit of change if I was in there, but I think it would be a lot of backpedaling more than progressive change.
No. Don't be so hard on yourself. Chuck your hat in the ring. What were you going to do? Get an AFL game down at it wasn't Winchelsea, was it? It was Birregurra?
No, I reckon Colac should always have a JLT game. I think the first one they had was the biggest crowd out of all the community series games on that week.
There you go. Tune in, Big Gill. Money making right there.
So I suppose, because we actually cut that pretty short. Another thing that I wanted to touch on. Another person being in the spotlight is number 1 draft pick Jason Horne-Francis. With body language, back chat to senior players, his future, and his future actually after this season, which is quite crazy. How do you digest all of that? What's your thoughts?
I'll tell you what, I reckon that Jack Watts can go back and hide away to whatever he's doing these days. I'm not too sure whether his opinion is and ever was really relevant and why he'd be saying that kind of stuff right now. It's ridiculous. Okay, so what, you're a number 1 draft pick that had high pressures. I think that every number 1 draft pick has. I think that he was an anomaly. But to suggest that, that he should leave his club, if he's not enjoying the atmosphere and the culture, then it's a different story. But Jack Watts isn't going to know that.
Exactly. The only people who know are the people inside the 4 walls, and probably realistically, Jason himself, the coach, maybe his management, his family, and maybe some people that he's close with at the club. With the body language thing, I think it's a bit of overkill, a bit of media uproar. You live in your dream, come and, play AFL. Obviously, you're not at a very successful side at the moment. I'm not sure what Jason's junior career was like, if he had a very successful junior career. I know from the Sandful, he came from a side that played pretty well, played finals, I think maybe played in a preliminary final. So I don't think you can knock him for just some poor body language. Maybe he was having a bad game. Well, he did actually have a bad game, and he was just frustrated with himself that he wasn't able to get himself in the game. And I think he's just thinking, what can I do? What can I do?
Yeah, you see a lot of the other people that have been drafted this year as well. The first one that comes to mind is Dacos, and they get put in tactically in positions where they're able to win the ball and show off their skills. I think that the conversation should be generated more around how much trouble David Noble's in.
Yes.
I think that he's almost got to go. Like they are insipid every week. I would hate to be a North Melbourne fan, which is why I've got so much credit for them last week for rocking up, because they don't even show any fight. And a part of it is the lack of skill they have. But teams have gone through that. You've gone through that with Richmond. I've gone through that with St Kilda. Every fan has had to deal with that. Melbourne, they stand out. But David Noble has a worse coaching record than Mark Neild did.
Yeah, wow.
During that shocking Melbourne team. And, like that Melbourne team didn't have anybody. Like their number one player was Liam Jurra and Austin Wanamiri, just, small forwards who were, had real X factor and could, tear a game apart. But, like North Melbourne, they have some good players. And I think that, look, I would be surprised if he's coaching next year, David Noble.
Yeah, obviously with the departure of Leon Cameron, maybe does Leon Cameron get a look in?
Yeah, or do they go for Clucko? Do they give it, with their little Tasmania link?
Yeah, there could be other coaches following their way, whatever McVeigh's doing after this year. Ken Hinkley, does he get the sack? I don't think he does. I think he's pretty safe. But I watched most of that North GWS game. I thought North defended pretty well. Like, generally, they defended well.
Geez, did you have nothing better to do or something?
It's the other game on, to be fair.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
They defended very well, but coming out of defense, they were shocking. Just basic skill errors, 20-meter kicks on a 45, not being hit. They did have some really good passages coming out of half back, but I tell you what, it was probably about 1 out of 20.
I went to the St Kilda North game a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed for about 3/4 of the game, North were 3 goals down at quarter time, and then for the rest of the game, they had at least one person back, spare man back. Now you're 3 goals behind in start of the second quarter, and I thought they'd played okay up until that point. Such a negative mindset to try and get any run if you've got a spare man back and you're struggling to already win the ball up forward. It just made no sense to me.
And another thing about the Horne-Francis thing is that he's a very, very talented footballer. He wasn't getting his hand on the ball much. And you can understand being frustrated when you're chasing tail all day. I know that I've had that sort of feeling as well playing football where, you're trying to get a touch. You're trying to sort of have somewhat of an impact, but you just can't because it's just going back and forth and you're just chasing all day. It's not a great feeling.
Yeah, it's tough. And you see that there's so many paths of development. Like you compare him, and this one is a more uncommon kind of upbringing, but you've got Jamara Ugle-Hagan, who, can't get a gig because of the academy where he ended up becoming pick number 1. So, it leaves a lot to be desired. I've got one quick question. That's actually reminded me of something. Okay, so Melbourne, they're obviously having extreme forward 50 woes at the moment. They can't connect. They're struggling to kick goals. Now, on the Queen's birthday clash, they picked Mitch Brown?
Yes.
Mitch Brown over Wiedemann. Serge, if you are Sam Wiedemann, what are you doing in 2023?
I think there are conversations that need to be had at the end of the year if he's not, pardon me, if he's not getting a gig ahead of Brown. Yeah, I think that's just a conversation that has to be had because there are sides that do need key forwards. and obviously got to look out for what's best for yourself. One thing I did notice though from that game was Melbourne's entry, and credit to Collingwood with their pressure. Melbourne's entries were terrible. Even
Yeah,
coming
just
off
bombs.
half back, they were woeful. Yeah, it was just
Yeah.
bombs. Collingwood do have they have a very good marking defense with Howe and Darcy Moore and Maynard. They're very good down back. They'll clunk them every day. So
Geez,
I think
Collingwood play a good style of football. I'll give them
they are a
that.
great side to watch. When they're on, they
Yeah.
are one of the best sides in the comp to watch.
They just fly through the middle. It's almost, if they're good enough skill wise, it's a foolproof plan because no one can touch them once they get moving.
So I think, yeah, from what I was saying is that I think a lot of it stems back to Oliver and Petrarca. The people coming from the midfield, lower the eyes. Ben Brown's a decent forward. Mitch Brown, yeah. Obviously, Jackson might be up forward with Gawn out. So Jackson's got a good chance to show his worth.
Do they bring in Wiedemann or do they bring in Majak Daw?
I think Majak Daw's injured at the moment.
Oh, geez, you're all over it then. Well, they got the bye this week. It'll be very interesting to see.
So I just want your quick tips from this week and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so we got Richmond Carlton tonight.
I'm going to go Richmond. Only reason is because I don't think they're going to slip 7 goals again like they did in round 1. I thought they were the better team for the large part of, not the large part, but I thought they were the better team, except for that last quarter. Richmond for me.
Yeah, I'm going with Carlton. I just think Carlton's midfield, even without Shearer, I still think that their clearance game is great and Richmond's clearance game isn't that great. I think that's where it'll be the difference again.
Decimated backline.
Decimated backline, but it's all about getting it up there. That's the first thing. So then your mob St Kilda against the arch nemesis Essendon.
I would like to think that St Kilda will win. Darcy Parish is out for Essendon, which I think he's their most important player. Be interesting to see how Peter Wright goes. I think Dougal Howard's not playing really well at the moment, or not well in a one-on-one contest. So I'll phrase it like that. So I can see you smirking there, and I know exactly why. He's still better than Alex Keith. So
I was meaning about old buddy 2 meter shit eater.
But yeah, tomorrow's match is Spud's match for a really good cause for mental health. So it'll be good to get to the game and for it to get the for mental health to get the recognition and time that it deserves, so people are more willing to speak about it and open up.
Yeah, well, on the radio, I was coming home. David Schwartz actually picked Essendon. I don't know what he is on. Jeez. I want what he's on.
Yeah.
But St Kilda do this, and I think St Kilda do this pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Port Adelaide and Sydney, big ramifications for Port Adelaide. Couple of outs with Gray and Boak. I did pick Port initially when I did my tips this morning until I saw that Gray and Boak weren't playing, and that's what swung me towards Sydney now. I think Boak's such a pivotal player, and Robbie Gray's got that real X factor that in a game like that could really do a couple of things that would get them over the line.
Yeah, agreed. You can almost bank on them, really knuckling down and giving them a real contest. I think Sydney's probably got a bit too much class. They got Cunningham coming in off the back line. He's a real silky user. And then you got Franklin as well, who we saw brought Sydney back into it against that Richmond game. I will go Sydney.
Yeah, Port can rock up and they will provide a contest, but I just think Sydney, like what you said, will outclass them. Then we head out west. We got West Coast hosting Geelong. West Coast got a few players back. Sheed, Yeo, McGovern, and Rioli, I think.
I think so.
But I still think that won't be enough to combat Geelong. Geelong are a very good side. Yeah,
exactly right. Might stop the bleeding a little bit, and those 50-point losses that we're becoming accustomed to at one stage might become something like 3 or 4 goals. It'll be interesting to see what kind of crowd they get to Saturday afternoon time slots. I don't know, WA, I'm assuming the weather will be nice over there, but I could be wrong. it was be interesting to see now that they've got a few of their big guns back, whether the crowd starts coming back. So, call to arms for them this week. They're on notice.
Yeah. And then for Saturday night, we have arch rivals GWS hosting the Bulldogs. Now, I did pick the Bulldogs on my tips. Little did I not remember, silly me, that they've got a new coach and they're actually in pretty decent nick. I think the Giants can win this at home, especially with Bailey Smith being out. Johannesson comes in for his first game of the year. Ugle-Hagen's been called up, which is good. But I think the Giants are playing pretty good footy, and I think being at home as well. And the Dogs are really struggling, and I think
and Shaki
beat them in the midfield
as well. So
yeah, nice.
Be interesting. It looks like they're going to play taller. And you're right. GWS have been in good form, and they're scoring. They're scoring a lot. It's dangerous when teams can kick big scores because you can nullify them for 3 quarters. But if all they'll need is a 10-minute period. I'm going to go GWS. Change it up.
And Bulldogs defense isn't fantastic. This game is really intriguing. Gold Coast and Adelaide on Sunday. Gold Coast, they need to win this if they want to keep their season alive. I feel if they lose this one, they've got Port the next week. I don't know if they'll get over Port, so they really need to win this. But I think if they lose this one, it's curtains. I think Gold Coast will win, being up at Metricon, but I'm not saying it confidently.
Yeah, they've become a lot more consistent. It used to be the question of which Gold Coast will rock up. And in this match, it's the question of which Adelaide will rock up. So yes. I'm going to tip Gold Coast based off that. And I've got a bit of a fun fact for you. So if Elijah Hollands plays, debutant coming through, at the moment, as we sit here tonight, Gold Coast is the last team to have a player debut this season.
Yeah, right.
So that might end the spell there at round 14.
All right. I reckon that's everything. Thanks for your company. And thanks everyone for listening. We are done. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.